Hey everybody, welcome to our November webinar here at DSCS. I'm Dan Sfera. I've got Chris Sauber here. I've got Vader, the unofficial DSCS mascot. That is Chris's German Shepherd, for those wondering. So, how's it going, Chris?
It's going. It's been an interesting day so far.
Yeah, quiet. Everyone seems to be on holiday mode already, right? It's been a little slow on the studies front, has it? Or actually,
It's picking up a little.
right, but this week it's like
Oh, yeah, this week's slow.
the volume of emails is like
Less
cut
than
in half,
Yeah.
right?
A little bit. Yeah. I don't know about cut in half, but definitely less than usual.
So today we're going to talk about investigators, how to find PIs, how to find sub-Is, how to find doctors for your clinical trials. So whether it's your first PI that you're bringing on or whether it's your 50th physician that you're partnering with, same process. So let's see what kind of slides Amy made for us, all right? We're going to talk about it.
So I have a question before you even get on.
Here, grab the mic, Chris.
So, no, what's the question for you?
Oh, okay, go ahead and ask.
So, does the number of PIs a site can utilize dictate success?
The amount of sites?
Yeah, they mentioned if you have 50 PIs, that dictates success.
Not necessarily. So, no, it doesn't. You can be unsuccessful with 50 PIs, just as you can be successful with one, in my opinion. I've never had a site with 50. The max I've had across 3 sites under the same company name was like 8 maximum, right? And we were successful.
But when you had those 8, because I know your situation, you were still kind of limited on indication, right? If you had the spectrum, right, do you think that would open the gateway for more success?
Yeah, because so if you have, yes, you're right. So what you're getting at is if you're trying to diversify, you're trying to make your clinic as recession proof as possible or as resistant to cycles as possible. And cycles meaning different therapeutic indications, right? So right now, November 2017, I almost said 2018.
21st.
Yeah, November 21st, 2017, we're seeing a lot of Alzheimer's studies. And we have been most of the year.
I think CNS is picking up as a whole. CNS is picking up as a whole. We're seeing more schizophrenia, bipolar, depression. Just CNS in general is picking up, where it had been slow for a fairly long time, I think.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, but bringing on new specialists, you never know when a new medical indication or therapeutic area is going to get hot. I mean, you don't know.
Sure, there's a new compound developed and for a specific indication, and it has all kinds of where they branch off for different sub indications of that specific specialty.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, absolutely.
So that's why this is important. Even if you're good with your current PI, sub-I situation, you always want to bring on more because you never know when somebody's going to want to retire, when a sponsor doesn't like a particular PI for whatever reason. Maybe they drop the ball on a study, and then basically you can't use that PI, right?
At least with that specific at least with that sponsor.
Or if it's with a big CRO with many sponsors.
Yeah, if it's quintiles, you're kind of SOL, right?
Quintiles, INC, Icon to some extent, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with CNS. I mean, that's which is that, Icon or INC?
INC.
INC, right. So if you you have a psychiatrist, you're only PI, and you drop the ball with INC, well, you've kind of limited yourself on the studies you're going to see in the future.
All right, so let's go through these slides, and then we'll have Q&As. By the way, everyone's on mute. I don't know if you can unmute yourself in a webinar, but you can chat your question. So we're back on. We had sound. We lost the sound. The mic got unplugged. Let me share the slides again. So finding a PI. So I did not look at these slides. Amy made them. So if she does not like us, who knows what's going to be on
There'll be a
here.
lot of surprises in store for everybody.
So we apologize in advance. But let me go through these slides, Chris, and then you add some color commentary. But let's not unplug the mic, okay? We got to be careful with this. Okay, so should be the PI or any sub-I. Okay, so on these slides, when you see principal investigator, it means sub-investigator as well. Okay, or just investigator. Anyone, any physician that's an MD or a DO that's licensed to practice in the state in which you are operating your research clinic and lives relatively close to you. All right, so what do you think so far about that? What, especially the living close to you part?
Well, a couple of things. So, one, I assume, but you know what they say about assuming, that our audience knows the difference between principal investigator and a sub-investigator.
They may not.
Right, so let's clarify.
Okay.
So, principal investigator is the individual who's responsible for the conduct of the trial. They're the ultimate authority at site level in regards to whatever study is being conducted. Sub-investigator is not in that position, and they may not even be an MD. Sub-investigator can be, sponsors are more and more wanting to see anybody that has any large influence on the trial labeled a sub-investigator. So your research coordinator nowadays could be a sub-investigator for some sponsors. But for the purposes of these slides, this presentation today, we'll be speaking, I think, solely of MDs, principal investigators and sub-investigators, MD status. And the reason to live close to the site would make, I think, common sense. They're more readily available. If the PI is located 2-hour drive away, it may be difficult coordinating patient visits, monitor visits, and the like. So the closer they are, the more access you will have to them, typically.
That's right. Thanks for clarifying. So let's talk about geography, okay? How important is it for the PI to be, or the physician to be located within driving distance of your clinic?
I just went over that.
All right, but say it again. So some of these people are putting ads on Craigslist, and their PI is actually like 60 miles away, sometimes in a different state.
Yeah, well, you have a problem if they're in another state. Are they licensed in your state? That's the first thing to discuss, right? So if you're in California and the PI that you're considering lives in Arizona or Nevada, which borders California, are they licensed to practice in California? They have to be licensed. Secondly, is it convenient for them? Because again, there's schedules that have to be kept once patients are seen, and can they be accessible enough to see those patients and also be at site for monitor visits?
Thank you. Okay, mic's still plugged in. Okay, important, and Amy put this in the slides, important because if the PI lives far away or in another state, they will rarely be on site, which can lead to PI oversight issues. Board certification, all right? It's not required, but a lot of these sponsors, because they're academics or the studies are designed by academics, for some reason they prefer board certification. It's not required. Actually, how many of our current PIs from the sites that you and I manage directly
That we own?
Yeah. Are they board certified?
I think all but one, actually.
Okay.
All but one, and it's not really a problem for the one that's not board certified. I would say maybe 10% of studies require the PI to be board certified. So basically we're cutting off 10% of possible studies that PI would be eligible to conduct.
Okay. So specific things to look for in your first PI. First PI should preferably be a general practitioner, family practice, or internal medicine doctor with their own private practice. This is probably the most important thing especially when you're starting out. When you're looking for additional investigators to add to your clinic, to add to your portfolio of physicians, it's less important because hopefully you already have a database established. But how important is it for your first PI to have their own private practice?
It's hugely important. So one of the the biggest issues in research is how are you going to get the patients? So if you're establishing a site that's strictly research, where are these patients coming from? So, and it may not seem like a big issue. Maybe you haven't established a database, but certain indications. But if you're going to utilize a general practitioner, that's going to open up probably 80%. Taking oncology out of the equation, that's going to open up the site to about 80% of trials. So you would like to see a private practice because nobody has a database established with all the different indications, right? You need a general practitioner who sees all of these individuals all the time, regularly, and you can easily sell this to a sponsor that you can get patients for this given trial. The doctor sees them, and even if they don't, you can still sell it because here's the monitor walks onto the site, into the clinic. They see people waiting in the lobby. It's an easy sell to say to the sponsor, again, even if you don't have a database of these patients, that yes, we do, right? They're sitting in the lobby right now. It's a hard sell sometimes if you're trying to say you have a psychiatrist who wants to do a constipation study, right? And it's a research only site. How are you going to display that you can get these patients, right, for a constipation trial through a psychiatrist?
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit more easily done, even if the psychiatrist has a general practice, right? If they have a clinic and they're seeing patients, sure, they're a psychiatrist, but you can sell that, hey, in my database, 10% of my patients complain of constipation. So I guess you can still sell psychiatrists. Much more easy to do so with a general practitioner.
Thank you, Chris. Now talk a little bit, free plug here. We have a Site Owner Academy. Okay. So one of your modules in the Site Owner Academy, I think it's week 2, right? Mm-hmm. Week 1, we go through how to find PIs, which we use many of these strategies here. Week 2 is all about office layout. And the next bullet point on the slide says, Amy did a good job so far. Okay. It is recommended that your first PI should have their own office with enough space to conduct clinical research. Mm-hmm. So just give us a 2-minute synopsis of what sufficient space to conduct clinical research actually means.
Okay, so first, Dan and I did a walkthrough video of a research site and what you need to encompass research. So I don't know where that link is. It's on clinicaltrialsguru.com. Right?
Yeah.
And there's a link on the homepage.
Yeah.
For that, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so yeah, you can watch the link there. But a research site needs, I would say, a minimum of 1,200 square feet, with preferably about 7 office spaces, individual office spaces. You need a room. Obviously a lobby for patients to sit and wait. You need an exam room for the patients to be seen. Preferably a conference room for site selection visits. This way all the office staff can gather with the monitor in a room to review the material. You need a lab to draw blood and process it. You need a drug storage room with limited access and fully enclosed, in other words, no windows, to store the IP. Need a room for the monitor to monitor visits when they're on site to do their IMDs. Now that they could be placed in the conference room, but it's better to have another room as well outside of that, which you could use the exam room as well, but I would recommend another room on top of that, just in case you're seeing patients, data monitors there, and you maybe have 2 monitors on site. Once you're busy, this is going to happen. You need a coordinator room in which you can house the study-related documents there, but I would also recommend another room for that as well. That could be the IP room too. Am I missing any rooms here?
No, but pros and cons. The next slide shows pros and cons of using your own office for a site versus using the PI's office, which we actually got into this topic in the How to Find More Studies webinar that we just did. But of course, you can check out these slides here. It's less upfront cost when you use the PI's office. You have easier access to patients. You don't have as many issues with PI oversight. Potentially, you can leverage some of the existing infrastructure, such as the employees and the equipment of the staff. So that's pretty much what the difference are between using your office and the PI's office. So how to find PIs? Okay, the first thing you need to do, your sphere of influence. So who do you know? You know somebody. Is it your own doctor? Is it a family friend? Somebody that knows a doctor near you? That's where I would start. Okay, that's the lowest hanging fruit. And then you go on Indeed. You post an ad, Craigslist, LinkedIn and Facebook to a lesser degree. They work as well. But Indeed and Craigslist, I mean, those are practically free, right?
So Craigslist is not free, but it's close to free. Depending on your area, it can be as much, I think, as $100 for an ad. And as little, I think, as $20. So it just depends on your locale. Then Indeed is free unless you want to use their Supreme service, in which you always come up on the first page or something. I forget how it works, but I think you come up.
Oh,
and it's going to be another issue. You're going to have to redo it once it comes unplugged.
Yeah.
Yep. Ask it for if they can hear us.
Yeah, we're good now.
You sure?
Yeah.
How do you know?
It works. I see it.
Okay. So Indeed has a paid service in which you come up on the first page. I think they charge $400 for that. So Indeed's a little bit more costly. If you want to use their Supreme service, though, it's not always necessary. And you actually will get response from these ads. A significant response at times. Again, it depends on your location. So, yeah, they both work very well.
Okay, now one thing I love that I learned from Darshan Kulkarni is this openpaymentsdata.cms.gov.
And who's Darshan Kulkarni?
Darshan Kulkarni is a cool guy. He's like this awesome dude. He's an attorney.
Specializing in...
He can't say specializing. He's an attorney.
But he focuses on...
I've introduced him that way, and he shoots me down right away.
But he does focus primarily
focuses on clinical research,
right,
and pharma. Well, he uses openpaymentsdata.cms.gov to find clients, to find you physicians that may need his services, or whatever the case may be. But sites can use it too. So openpaymentsdata.cms.gov. You can search by zip code. You can search by name. These are ways to identify PIs or physicians in your area, not PIs. And then it's up to you to educate them about research. Another thing I like about openpaymentsdata.cms.gov is you can actually find what sponsors they've taken money from. And sometimes it tells you if it's for research or if it's for speaking. So this is part of the whole Sunshine Act, right? And then it's up to you to educate them on research. So this is why I think it's important to have a flyer or a brochure that you can send to potential physicians, right? And I mean, we have a few flyers, right?
We do.
Yeah, and we give those to our clients too. So, but it's nothing fancy. You can make your own flyer in 20 minutes, and you just want to touch on the basics of clinical research. They generally have the same objections, right? So find doctors online, show up to their office, call them, email them, mail them a physical letter. Just have as many touch points as you can with the physician, all right? So be careful how you word your flyer or ad. Beware that doctors may have revoked licenses or bad standing. That's actually an interesting one. So on Craigslist, what have we noticed? Many of these physicians, foreign physicians that are not licensed to practice here,
yep,
but they respond to that because they are physicians.
Yep.
Or...
well, they can even be like registered nurses and things of that nature.
Or their license could have been revoked.
Or it's under suspension or investigation. And you have access to this data, so you just need to Google. As the slide says, make sure that their license is in good standing. Their license is in good standing in your state. Well, in any state, Because if a sponsor finds out that they've had prior issues with their license at any time, you're probably not going to get a trial through that PI. So yes, good standing always.
We ran an ad for a business partner in Southern California, and we started checking the license, the state of the license, right? Like the status.
Right.
And this doctor's license was revoked and never revealed that to us.
No, it wasn't revoked. It was wasn't revoked. It was, I can't recall. It
Suspended.
It wasn't suspended. But
Probation.
Probation. Yes, it was under probation.
The sponsors don't like that.
Yeah, and they never will. So doctor will have difficulty getting study, even when it's taken off probation.
Yes. Another site of ours, or one that we own a small percentage in Southern California, they have, thankfully they had a lot of PIs, but one guy was perfect fit for a study. Well, it turns out like a decade or two ago,
tax related, right?
It was an IRS related issue. Yeah. And it showed up on his license. His license was on probation. And this was a controlled substance drug that the sponsor was looking into, so they rejected the PI based off of that.
Yep.
So they could be picky at times.
What do you mean could be? They are picky.
Sometimes more than others.
True. But
right.
Yes, they have it in their mind, which maybe rightfully so, I don't know, that the FDA is going to be very, they're going to scrutinize every minor detail. And in this particular instance with the IRS, I don't think you see it either. I don't see how this would have any bearing on the drug, right? The developmental process of it, the research process, why tax evasion of some sort would cause the investigator to provide less adequate or reliable data. I don't see it, but sponsors are picky.
These academics sometimes they make decisions that don't make sense.
Yeah,
right?
Without a doubt.
So expect rejection, okay? Like this is where your skills as a salesperson are going to come in, and many people don't associate sales as a skill to have in research. I think that's nonsense. I think you need to be a salesperson regardless of whatever business you're running. You need to think sales first. So this is a perfect example. You're going to run into dozens of objections. You're going to get gatekeepers. So when you show up to a doctor's office, you're going to get the front desk staff, right? Like, how do you get past them? You have to convince people to just let you get a foot in the door just so you can then have the opportunity to convince the doctor to do research with you. So what does this mean? It means you get rejected more often than you're going to get accepted, right?
No, one of our business partners was really good at getting beyond the gatekeeper. And
who's that?
I can't say their name.
I know her. Him? Her?
Yes.
Her.
Yeah, Southern California.
I know her.
Yeah, and she was very good at getting beyond the gatekeeper and setting up appointments to speak with the doctor. And I think the way that she went about this was just went in. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong here. She would go in, speak with the front desk personnel, and say, I'd like to schedule a time to speak with the doctor and staff and provide a lunch. Right. So she operated similar to like a pharmacy rep in that regard.
Yes.
So I'll bring lunch, and the front desk personnel, they're typically not as well paid as the doctors, so they readily work with something like this because they see something in it for them.
It works. She went in to the offices dressed professionally with a name tag with the clinic, the company name, which actually we're going to do here at Breakthrough and at Global when we go recruit patients at facilities. Dora's actually making name tags for everyone with the company because it makes you look more professional. Like you're less likely to be rejected. You still are going to be rejected most of the time, but you're less likely to be rejected if you go in wearing a name tag, because all of a sudden they're like, okay, this is not a patient. This is somebody who's here to sell something.
Sure.
Right. And these private practices are accustomed to getting sales reps come in all the time, and they all wear badges, right?
Yeah.
Same thing when you recruit patients at these facilities. If you show up without a name tag on, they think you're a friend or a family member of someone there. But with a name tag right away they're like, okay, this is a separate case,
Mhm.
and we're going to handle it
It's
differently.
not patient related in the sense of the doctor's going to be seeing this person in that regard.
So everyone, it was actually Monica's idea, but Dora's making the laminate cards for our 2 sites when they go recruit.
Yeah.
And it could be used when you go recruit for physicians also.
Absolutely.
Right? So rejection, get used to it. If you don't like it, tough. Send somebody else to do it. Or don't have a business because you're going to get rejected 90% of the time.
When you own a business, sales is a huge part of it, even in research. You have to be selling.
Right.
You have to sell your site's capabilities to get the study. You have to sell yourself to get a PI. You're always selling.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Next slide. Presenting the opportunity. This is where you need to be a little more professional, right? And we know, like, we used to not go with name badges. Now we will. In 2018, we will when we go out in the community. But we would know beforehand, and we would dress a little nicer than we normally do, right? Like today, I'm in a t-shirt and jeans. If I knew I was going out to recruit physicians, I would dress a little nicer, right?
Professionally, yes.
So then have a flyer or brochure ready. Know their objections beforehand. I have videos on what PI's objections are, physician's objections. I actually have a live call I did with a physician that responded to a Craigslist ad, and his objections, the stuff he was asking, was what 90% of physicians are going to ask. Okay, I had a colleague who did research, and he did horribly. I don't want the FDA to come into my room or into my office. I don't want to handle mountains of paperwork. I don't want to lose my patients. These are objections. You got to learn how to handle it. You're not going to learn how to do it unless you experience the objections first. Yes, you can listen to Chris and myself. We can make it a little easier for you to do it, but it's no substitute for doing it yourself. Getting in the trenches, getting your hands dirty, talking to more doctors. You want more physicians to join your clinic? Simple solution. Talk to more physicians. That's it.
That's it.
We can end that webinar just on that.
Yeah.
Right? But these are strategies for how to do it. So discuss payments. They're going to ask for payments.
Of course.
How do you pay them? Well, there's a million ways to pay a physician. Right?
It's not about a million, but there's quite a few.
There's tons. So you got to figure out what they want first and then reverse engineer back to you. And if you guys find something that's mutually agreeable, you can go ahead and do it. If not, some doctors want ownership in the company. Some doctors just want to be an employee. Some doctors just want a monthly stipend. Some doctors want a percentage. Some doctors want a combo of all of these. I don't know what those doctors are going to want. You're going to need to find out.
Some are ridiculous. Some are ridiculous.
Give a story without unplugging the mic.
So, I think, here's a little plug. We'll often help sites who are either unwilling or unable to do this.
Oh yeah, give them the plug. This is good.
To do what we're presenting here. So we will do it for you. If you need a PI, it's $2,000. We'll run advertising for 6 months. We will discuss with the doctor directly, with you and the doctor. We'll discuss with them how research works, what's expected of them, what they will be compensated to do this. So we recently spoke with a doctor, less than a month ago. They wanted 80%. 80% of the revenue from research, and that's ridiculous. That's just not. That's not going to work. 80% is the remaining 20% will be going to your bills. So there's no profit left for the owner. So of course 80% is ridiculous, but it can, depending on the arrangement, it can be as high as, I would say, 50%. If the doctor is providing the facility, they're paying all the bills, right? They're paying the rent, they're paying electricity, all the miscellaneous expenses associated with the site. If that's going on, it could be as high as 50%. I would say 40% is fair in that situation, but you can go up to 50. If all they're doing is the PI, it's a research site exclusively, they're coming to your site, I would say somewhere around 20-25% is reasonable. If you're paying a percentage. If you're paying a monthly stipend, so how many hours are they on site? What's the typical hourly wage of a doctor? 100, 150 an hour. So you you would kind of find a salary that's mutually agreeable in that regard. How many hours they're spending on site per month times 100 or 150 an hour. That would be their salary. So again, this is just something to keep in mind when negotiating payment, right? Just try and be fair. Don't try and take away too much from the doctor, because they're going to figure it out what's being made eventually, and it's going to upset them if they're not being compensated accordingly. Right, we had another person that we helped get a doctor that we spoke with maybe about 2 weeks ago. Another client that we helped get a PI, and
I don't remember, but okay, continue.
Right, they got a sweetheart of a deal, but so much so that I think it's not going to last.
Oh yes, I do remember.
Yeah, they're.
I even told her, "You got an excellent deal. Don't ask for anything else."
Right, and they still wanted more.
In this case, the site owner was being unreasonable.
Yes, they were providing a compensation of I think 30%, and the doctor is paying all expenses.
Yeah,
and only getting 30%.
Beautiful deal.
Yeah, but it's not fair. So your goal should be fair. What's fair?
So I have a question for you, Chris. When is it appropriate to start talking money with the physician?
Well, it's probably
the first meeting.
It's probably going to be appropriate the first meeting, because that's going to be, if not their peak interest, it'll be second most, right?
They always ask, how much am I going to make?
Right.
And my answer is always, I don't know. Every budget's different.
Right. So again, I mean, it depends on how you're paying them.
Mm-hmm. But rather than talking about the amounts, what you can do is talk about how they're going to get paid, like the process, based on what are you doing, or a percentage, or do you want equity,
or
do you want fee for service, or a salary, or a monthly stipend. I'd rather have that conversation in that first meeting than specific numbers, because chances are you don't have a study yet. If you do, and you're just adding a sub-I that just needs to do one assessment, then you know, hey, for this, every time you do this assessment, you're going to get $400.
Well,
right?
This seems a little high to me, but sure.
Well, for a specialist, sometimes that's what they charge for assessments, right?
Sure.
So, and on top of that, we're going to build up your CV so that we can start applying for other studies for you. And then we can work out a different way to pay you for those things.
Mm-hmm.
If you're the PI, you're going to get paid differently than if you're a sub-I. Okay, next slide. Know their objection. Here's the objections. Okay, we already went through a lot of these, but heard bad things about conducting research from other physicians. Amy did a good job on these slides. Look at this. Possible response. Let me know if you agree with these responses, okay? And if there's any objections missing from here, even though we already went through a couple. Heard bad things about conducting research from other physicians. This is constantly an objection. Why? Because the physicians that are actually having good experiences with research, they don't want to share, because they don't want more competition. They're only going to share when they have a bad experience. Well, I think therefore everyone hears the bad experiences.
Well, I believe that to be true even outside of research, right? And,
right.
I mean, oftentimes people don't share their good experience, but they're more than willing to share their bad experience in any situation.
On Yelp, this is true on Yelp. Anyone that goes out to eat, you'll see way more bad reviews than good, right?
Sure.
You're more compelled when you have a bad experience
to share that information,
to go write a review than when you have a good one.
Yep, absolutely. And then there's a statistic that you've often cited. The percentage of doctors that do their first study will never do another.
Yeah, it's like 90%.
Right. And why is that? Because they're just unaware of what's involved, what's required to conduct research. They jump in, they have no prior research experience, and they're overwhelmed with what's required. They didn't take into account all what's necessary. And it's not that there's a lot required of a PI. It's just that when you don't know what you're doing and you start doing it incorrectly, it becomes overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
So you need somebody in place, and this is what you can sell the doctor on, is, well, I know how to conduct research. It won't be an issue for you. I'll make sure everything is done correctly.
Mm-hmm. Next objection. Afraid of FDA audits or of being sued. Okay. Who wants that? Who needs extra headaches, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who needs to go to jail? When people hear of FDA,
yeah, nobody's going to jail.
Of course, but people sometimes think the worst.
Yeah, they exaggerate.
So the FDA can audit research sites. However, it is highly unlikely And the worst consequence usually is not as bad as what they think it will be, like jail.
Right.
What's the worst thing that typically happens?
Well, I think the absolute worst thing, I mean, are we connected?
We are back on.
Okay,
The worst
sorry.
thing that can happen.
Sorry. So the worst thing that can happen for a PI, I mean, a case unless it's absolute neglect or, I mean, if they were intentionally killing somebody, they can go to jail. But, let's just assume that's not occurring, right? So let's just say there's neglect. Something happens, a patient dies. They're most likely not even going to lose their license, but they will be blacklisted from doing research. It depends on the circumstances. There could be a suspension to their license, but, if a doctor's behaving in this manner, then they're doing it within their own practice as well, I would assume, right?
Okay.
So, but even that's a rarity to have a license suspended in research. They get blacklisted from research. They just won't be participating in research. That's usually the worst thing that's going to happen.
Okay, the next objection, afraid of fines or losing their license. Your possible response. They will not, except in the case of fraud or severe lack of oversight, which can be avoided if they partner with you in conducting research.
Mm-hmm.
So when they ask you, well, I'm the doctor, why am I only getting 20%? To me, that seems backwards. This is your objection.
Mm-hmm.
I take away all the possible bad things that can happen
Mm-hmm.
if I do my job right.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not here, you're not going to keep up with paperwork. You're not going to keep up with oversight. You're not going to maintain regulatory documents.
Yeah, you're not going to complete documents correctly.
You're definitely not going to handle queries.
Right.
And you're going to get an FDA audit.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And then you'll be done with research. If they send you a 483, right?
Absolutely.
So that's why I, the entrepreneur, need to work with you.
Mm-hmm.
This is how we both make money.
And in this situation, if you're paying 20%, you're also handling all the expenses.
Last objection, kind of related. Wants to reduce time commitment and too much paperwork. Okay, and again, same objection handling strategy here. You, the site owner, will provide or be the study coordinator. A lot of these doctors don't know what a study coordinator is. Don't assume that they do.
Even that it's required.
They don't even know what a monitor is.
Yeah.
They have no clue. This is where you need to be educated and explain the process to them. And again, 9 out of 10 are not going to even want to hear you. But 1 out of 10 will. Okay? And if you do a good job, they're going to join you as a physician. Next slide, how to pay. This is compensation, right? Different strategies. What do you think about combination of all of these? So we talked about hourly, independent contractor, payroll, fee for service, percentage, partnership, combination. Okay, there's no rules in research when it comes to paying physicians other than the anti-kickback rule, which actually talk a little bit about that because everyone's worried about those. Well, can I pay my doctor for referring patients? And sure. They're going to ask this too. We've heard this objection from physicians.
Well,
what's your answer for that?
Well, so, and I'm not an authority on this, so
you're not Dr. Sean Kulkarni.
I am not. But to my understanding, so the PI obviously can refer patients. It's their study, right? Can a sub-I refer patients? Absolutely. Can they be paid to do so? Yes. If they're listed on the 1572, they can be paid to refer patients. If they're not listed on the 1572, then they cannot be paid to refer patients. You can pay them for some other activity. You can pay them for chart review, but you cannot pay them a referral fee. You can if they're listed on the 1572. So just be careful of that and how you pay patients for referrals. There's really no set rules, at least that I'm aware of, but you will come into situations with a monitor where they may ask, because this has happened in my experience. So make sure that if they're not listed on the 1572, that if you're paying the doctor in some fashion, it's not a referral fee if they're not listed on the 1572.
Mm-hmm. Okay, next slide. And again, these slides will be available. The replay link will be sent to everyone. It'll also go on YouTube. So if you're calling in, which a lot of our attendees are today, you can just go to YouTube later. Go to the podcast. So actually, on the podcast, you won't be able to see slides, but you'll get the email. You'll get the link emailed to you since you registered for the webinar. And thank you for doing that. So once the doctor agrees to be your investigator, right? What do you need to do? Tell me if you agree with what Amy put on these slides. Obtain their CV in a Word format.
Why Word?
Why Word? Why Word? Can anyone chat? Why a Word document is important, and we're going to get to questions. We have a bunch of questions here as well. So why Word? Let me answer why. You want it in a Word format because you need to put your site name and address on it. That's it. Sponsors are not going to consider the doctor unless your site name and address is on it prior to reaching out for studies.
They want to make sure they're affiliated.
They want to make sure they're affiliated. Next thing, if you have a study, if you're in this far down the process of getting a study, you probably are going to have a CDA, right, which is a confidentiality disclosure agreement, and you need to have your PI sign it. Okay, explain to them this doesn't mean we have the study. This just means we get the opportunity to bid on the study. And I'm using the word bid loosely because that's what a non-clinical researcher would understand.
It's not always required that the CDA be signed by the principal investigator. It can be signed by a representative who has authority of the site to sign it often. I would say 50% of the time the PI needs to sign it, give or take.
Right, so you might need that. Synopsis, okay? So usually one of the first things I get when I talk to a PI or a potential physician about a study, like we actually did this with our nurse practitioner, right? Said, hey, we're considering I can't remember what it was, adolescent schizophrenia study. The first thing they say is, what's the inclusion criteria? I'd say, hey, wait, we don't know any of this yet. We just know the indication, and we could possibly be considered for it. Once we get the synopsis, I'll be able to explain it to you.
Sure.
Right? So that's what the protocol synopsis is. So explain to them that the CDA will allow for you to get the protocol synopsis.
Get the information.
Mm-hmm. And it'll give you another touch point opportunity for the PI or for the physician. Because sometimes the physician's excited when you have the first meeting, and then on the second meeting, or they forget about the fact that they were excited because they get busy. 2 weeks go by, 4 weeks go by, and now they hear from you again because, hey, remember that CDA we signed 4 weeks ago? Now we have a protocol synopsis, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now I have another touch point with you. I can actually discuss research with you furthermore, and further cementing our relationship, right? So these are good things to do. And then the feasibility survey, right? So most sites will fill it out without consulting the PI, but if the site has no way of getting patients other than this physician, then they would be a good one to consult with, obviously.
Yeah, there'll be questions like, what's the typical treatment of the PI for this indication? What's the standard treatment? So you might want to consult with your doctor in that regard.
The next slide, don't think that your job is done yet. Now that you have a PI that agreed to do a study with you, the next challenge becomes keeping them happy, keeping them engaged, making sure that they're referring patients, making sure they're meeting with monitors, making sure they're having oversight, right? How does one do this, Christopher?
Well, I would say there's two primary considerations here for keeping your PI happy, right? So when those monitors come for the IMVs, you want to make sure that they're not reporting any major issues, right? Monitors aren't stating to your PI, hey, your site's really screwing things up here, and this, and this is going on. And it's going to make the PI very apprehensive about continuing, right? Because I think the reputation's going to be tarnished in some fashion. So make sure you're doing the job right as the site, right? As the site owner or as the coordinator or both. And then secondly, are they getting paid, right? So I think so long as you're conducting the trial well, and there's always going to be some issues, but they're minor, hopefully, and the doctor is receiving a fair amount of payment, they're going to be happy, right? And then on top of that, if you can reduce their workload as much as possible, even more happy, right? So they're seeing a substantial check, hopefully. They're putting in limited work, and there's no real complaints. They're going to be plenty happy.
Mm-hmm. And this opens up a can of worms because obviously these physicians, they're smart people, right? Like they're educated. They're, for the most part, you have some.
There's varying degrees of smart.
There's some that you're like, how did this person ever get a license?
Yes.
Okay, but most of them are not like that. So they're gonna think to themselves at some point, once they learn the ebbs and flows of the business, why do I need Chris Hopper? Why? Well, who is this guy? He just runs around drinking Diet Cokes all day. Like, why do I need to pay him? Today it's Diet Pepsi. Why do I need to pay him more than what I'm getting? Right?
Sure.
And so, naturally, site owners want to have the PI sign a non-compete. But in my opinion, they're very hard to enforce. If the PI wants to leave and do studies on their own, there's really nothing you can do. Now, they'll never take your study because the sponsor already signed that contract in the site name, but they can take future studies. So what's a good defensive move? Because I'm all offense. So if a PI wants to leave, and PIs have left me before, that's okay. Let them go. We'll get new ones.
Well,
right?
I think one thing is to be proactively explaining to the PI what your role is and what you're doing.
Now, how do you do that, though? Like, every day, it's hard to do this on a daily basis.
Sure, and just whenever it presents itself, I think you should make sure it's crystal clear what you're doing, what you're offering. So
show your value.
Right, exactly. So you're bringing on studies. Now,
so that means you can't be an absentee owner, right?
Exactly. So show that you're bringing on studies, right? Hey, doctor, I have this study. So it's something you would like to pursue. So show that you're actually pursuing studies and keeping up on business development. Also, you're mitigating complaints, risks, right?
Regulatory authorities stopping by.
Exactly. You're taking care of the data. You're making sure it's clean. There's all kinds of ways to show that you have value. Right?
You're keeping the angry monitors and the angry regulators at bay. Yep. That's your job. Oh.
It's loose.
Lost sound again. You're keeping them at bay, right? So that's your value. You got to demonstrate that to them in some capacity. And again, unfortunately, that means that you got to show up from time to time.
Yep.
We know a lot of site owners that find a PI, get a study, have a coordinator in place, and then they're gone for months, right? And then the coordinator is supposed to do all the work, but guess what? The PI and the coordinator are working together.
Yeah.
The coordinator's not an owner. The PI is establishing a bond with that coordinator, not necessarily with you because you're not there, right? So last slide, and then we'll get into some questions. Never stop searching. This is an ongoing thing. This is where we can put our plug in here. So for our clients, we charge $1,000 a month. We'll help you find a PI. For that, we charge a one-time fee of $2,000. And we offer a money-back guarantee. We'll give you half of your money back within 6 months if we can't find you a PI that you work with, right? But for our clients, we help them out with strategies all the time, in addition to getting them studies and negotiating their contracts and all the other topics we talk about. But keeping your PIs happy is one of the things, right? So never stop searching. Just like with studies, you never stop applying for studies. You never stop getting patients. You never stop searching for physicians, right? So just because you have your first PI, that's great, but bring on new ones, because chances are your first one is either not going to want to work with you at some point, going to retire, going to get hit by a bus, right? A number of things can happen.
Let's hope not get hit by a bus, but yeah.
You never know. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. So you want to do some questions? I know we're gone over a little, but
we have questions?
You feel like some questions?
Sure.
Some Q&A right now? Okay. Let's do this one. Which one would be preferable to start, with your own space or a doctor's office? So the answer is a doctor's office. The next question is, what if you want to... well, we covered this so many times, but you're reducing your startup costs.
Yes, immensely.
Right? You have direct access to patients.
Yep.
Right? Because you don't need the patients to go anywhere else. They're already at the doctor's office.
Yep.
right? A lot of things going for you there.
Yeah,
You
cost and patience.
you can leverage the equipment that they have. Sometimes they already have equipment like
Yeah.
centrifuge, a weighing scale.
Almost free to get started.
Almost free, right? Next question. What if you want to start out with your own clinic for more control? This is good too, but there are some cons to that, which is basically the flip side of everything I said.
Yep.
Logistics of getting patients there.
Wow.
It's more costly.
Much more costly.
PI oversight's going to be an issue because now the PI's got to drive to another place,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
He's or she's used to sitting in their office and making money all day, seeing
Yep.
patients. Why are they going to want to go? It's going to take you at least an hour, even if you're 10 minutes away, right? They got to get their stuff ready. They got to stop what they're doing. They got to drive to you. They got to sit there with you for whatever amount of time, and then they got to drive back.
Yep.
Why? And then maybe they want lunch. So now you're telling them they got to skip lunch, right? You got to eat.
Unfortunately so.
Right? So, okay, which one would you recommend? Start out with their side and then work your way to your own is what I recommend. Are you saying most sites out there are mostly private practices? No. What would you say the percentage is? Private practice
I
sites?
have no idea. Honestly, I have no idea.
I want to say 50-50, but it sounds like a cop-out. But I think it's close to there. Because there's a lot of studies, right? And a lot more of these protocols are getting more complex.
Mm-hmm.
And they require private practice patients, right?
Yeah.
It'd be almost impossible to get just like referrals unless you have a really good sub-I in your network.
I've actually seen a few feasibility questionnaires. I shouldn't say that. A few study synopses recently in which it states right in the synopsis that the patients have to be seen on site. They have to be part of the private practice. And it can't even be that the doctor's a PI at another site. I can't remember exactly how it's phrased, but it can't be that the PI has these patients at their own, say they're a hospitalist or something of that nature, that they see the patients there and they bring them over to the research site. That's not even allowed. They have to be seen at a private practice. I've seen that in a study synopsis recently.
They're getting pickier. Okay, next one. Can I use a doctor who is a family friend or a doctor referred by a friend or business associate? Not only can you, I think you should. This is called your sphere of influence. I think this is where you need to start. You need to start from here and then branch out, right? So if you think of like a family tree, right? Starts with like somebody and then it branches out to all these. Mm-hmm. This is the same way with your sphere of influence, right? Who do you know? Okay, now you know those people. Now they refer you to someone. Now you know them. Now who do they know? And then who do they know? It just goes on forever, right? That's your sphere of influence. Can I contact hospitals in the area to get PIs? Yes, you can. Be careful with hospitals, okay? Because if the doctor has their private practice in a hospital,
if they're employed by the hospital.
If they're employed by the hospital and have their private practice within the greater hospital setting, those patients are not the doctor's patients.
But those could be two separate issues there, right? If they have their private practice but not employed by the hospital, if they have their private practice in the hospital but not employed by the hospital, that's okay, right? But if they're employed by the hospital, there could be certain regulations in their contract that will prohibit them from utilizing those patients.
Right, that's hospital policy, so you got to check with the hospital on their particular policy. Furthermore, even if they are their patients but they're housed in the hospital setting, you have another issue to deal with, which is local IRB.
Yeah.
So if you do the study within their office, now you got to deal with local IRB. Chances are sponsors don't want to work with you. They'd rather you have an office across the street that you can do central IRB. In fact, one of our clients does this. Right. Their doctor works in the hospital. Across the street, they have a private practice clinic. That's where they do research. And their patients just cross the street to get there.
Yep.
At least I think that's how it's going to work.
Yeah.
Are you going to visit that site, by the way?
Maybe.
You don't know yet, right?
No.
And that's it. So thank you. Normally we would put a plug in here, but you guys know what we do, right? We help sites get studies. We help sites negotiate contracts. We help sites find PIs. We help sites with their SO. We do everything. $1,000 a month, no contract needed. Good value. This is something I built because it's something I wanted when I first started out in clinical research way back in 2005. So again, thank you. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. And the replay link will be on, and we'll talk to y'all later. Bye-bye.